Welcome to HitPoint. It's the show where we talk about video games, movies, TV shows, and anything else worth discussing. I'm your host, Andrew Jeffries, and I'm joined by co-host Jeremy Robbins. Jeremy, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you doing today, Andrew?
I am doing excellent. I'm excited to really dig into our topic today, which is our top 10 games of all time. But before we get there, I do want to say we are supported via Patreon. So if you like what you see after 2 episodes, feel free to go there. And if you're able, chip a few bucks our way. I know we're both in life situations where we could really use a few extra bucks a month. If you can't, totally fine. Just keep watching and enjoying the content like normal. Jeremy, anything you have to add before we get into our top 10 list?
Yeah, and as you're watching episodes on our channel, if you like what you see, hit that subscribe button, like the videos. Um, yeah, we have more content that will be coming.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of good stuff today. So let's talk top 10 games of all time. Let's talk about how we sort of narrowed down our list of top 10 games. So, how did you go about doing that, Jeremy?
Man, I'll tell you what, it actually was very difficult for me to come narrow down my top 10, mostly because I did limit myself to franchises in the sense of if I liked multiple games in one franchise, I then just lumped them together and put the franchise as one of my numbers. So that opened up some spots I didn't expect to be there. And so then games made their way into my list. I had no idea I would even ever contemplate them being in my top 10, but it made it really cool because it just that it expanded my list more than what it would have been.
Yeah, for sure. I tried to, when I was approaching my games list, I tried to hit games that I've put a lot of time in, but I didn't want to necessarily pick games that I've spent the most time in, because those two lists are not necessarily going to be the same thing. But it had to be a game I played a lot. It's one that is still worth revisiting and holds up. Um, and those were kind of my two main sets of criteria that I sort of judged games by. And then I just did a kind of a sprinkling of my personality tastes with the games. And that's kind of how I made my list. I tried to keep it within the same series and bent the rules a little bit here and there, but we'll get into that as we get into that. But before we get into that, let's talk honorable mentions, because you and I both had a couple honorable mentions that we think are worth talking about and maybe might make our top 10 list someday. But I know in my case, one of them, I didn't put it on my top 10 just because it's not been around long enough for me to decide that it is a top 10, if that makes any
Mm,
sense.
yeah.
But I want to start with my first honorable mention, which is a game I really enjoy, but I don't think I could ever really put it on a top 10, and that is what I like to call Ubisoft the game. Um, Now, Ubisoft, the game, is usually a third person, sometimes first person, action adventure open world RPG where you're going around clearing control points and just trying to kind of unlock the map one thing at a time. There's lots of cool progression mechanics where you get abilities as you go through the story. The story is pretty boilerplate. No one ever really enjoys the story, but it's serviceable for the gameplay that it provides. And this is obviously kind of a joke. There's no such thing as Ubisoft the game, but Ubisoft basically makes one type of game, and that comes in a couple different flavors. And one flavor is the Assassin's Creed flavor, another is the Division flavor. What's the Ghost Recon? That's another one that's very similar, where it uses a lot of the same mechanics, but they make mechanically very similar games that are very fun to play. But I kind of consider them junk food gaming, where very fun to play, nothing wrong with it, nothing wrong for really enjoying it, but I just can't, in good faith, put it on a top 10 list. But I thought it was worth mentioning.
Yeah, it's a good mention. I mean, I enjoy the Assassin's Creed games from a story-wise perspective. Yeah, not the greatest stories, and also sometimes very disappointing with the directions they decide to take.
Very true.
Um, but yeah, it's still a worthy mention. Uh, so I also have two honorary mentions on for myself. Both of them are franchises. Um, they're games that I really do enjoy playing, and I play a lot of, and I've spent hours playing. But they were games I was like, they just can't quite make that top 10. So the first one of those is the Madden franchise. Um, I will never put a sports game into a top 10 list. There isn't. It's a sports game. I enjoy it. I love Madden. I love the NFL. I'm a huge NFL fan. but it's not something I could ever justify putting into the top 10, with it being a yearly iteration game where one year you may like what happened and the next year you can be utterly disappointed. Um, Case in point, the announcements for Madden 21 this year, very disappointing.
Yep.
If you want to know more of my thoughts, what was announced by franchise mode, you can check our video that I did on that with my reaction.
Yes.
Um,
You had some choice thoughts on the matter, and it was kind of fun hearing a side of you that I'm not used to hearing. I'm not used to hearing annoyed Jeremy, so that was a little fun.
yeah, so yeah, definitely check out that video if you want to know more about just my thoughts on Madden 21. But the Madden franchise in general, I've played Madden for years, over 10 years at least, and I've played a lot of iterations, and I enjoy it. I enjoy the simulation aspect of getting to play through franchises and seasons of a team and build them up and try to see if you can get to the Super Bowl and take a team that isn't very good to start with and see what you can do with them and how long it takes to get to the Super Bowl. Sometimes playing games, but a lot of times not, and just simulating and seeing how good of a GM you are. And beyond that is just being able to play with the players that are in the actual league. It's a lot of fun, and it's a very easy time waster for me, but something that I enjoy.
Mhm. Yeah, I do enjoy. I'm more of a FIFA guy, but I still enjoy the career mode quite a bit. So that is definitely a good time to be had with sports games. Totally agree. Not something I'd necessarily put on a top 10 list, but they are fun to visit. And sports games are interesting in that they provide a neat snapshot of where, technologically speaking, gaming is at kind of from year to year. And so you don't necessarily see the jump one year from the next, but if you do go back a couple years, it is interesting to see just how different of a game even FIFA was a couple years ago versus what it is now. So
Yep.
you do get some interesting snapshots like that. My next honorable mention is a game that probably would make my top 10 list, as I said earlier, if I had a few more years to stew on it. And I'm guessing it has been heading that way quite quickly. And that is CD Projekt Red's The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. If you've not played the game, the Witcher games are a series of games based on the Witcher series of books, which are a Polish series, fantasy series about a monster hunter for hire and just his quest to basically save his daughter without getting too much into it. That's a very simplified retelling of the story, but there's a lot of really cool things that happen both in the games and in the books. You should definitely try it out. The Witcher 3 is where CD Projekt Red really kind of managed to put together a really strong story with a really strong set of gameplay mechanics. Like, you could see what they were going for with The Witcher 1, but the gameplay was very rough around the edges. The Witcher 2 was quite a bit more refined, where it was had a lot more action elements to it, but it still didn't quite get there. But they absolutely nailed it with The Witcher 3 and just perfected all the systems that were there. And it is a gorgeous game, so much fun to play, really interesting story. If you're a fan of the books and somehow haven't played the games, go and play them. They're so good, and you don't really need to even play through the whole series. Each game is pretty well standalone. Like, there's some overarching stories that you can follow from game to game, but you really don't lose a whole lot just playing the individual entries. So The Witcher 3, definitely check it out.
Yeah, that's a game I've not played. I'm actually intrigued to check it out. It does look like it has a lot of graphic, and well, it looks really pretty. Let's
Yes.
just put it that way.
It is a very pretty game.
Um, so my other honorable mention, like I said, it's also another franchise. Uh, this is a superhero franchise called Marvel Ultimate Alliance. If you are a Marvel fan, especially from the comic standpoint and the movies, definitely would recommend checking this franchise out. Um, the developers of this game is a top down view game where you're just controlling one hero if you're playing with friends, or potentially up to four heroes, just going through different maps and fighting bad guys and then running into the bigger villains and having to defeat them as the bosses, and you're playing through a story. The really cool thing about this franchise is it's gotten better over time. They're older games, but they still are good even today. Like Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2 is based off the Civil War story, and from the comics. So for one, if you've only seen the movie in the MCU, definitely would recommend playing through this game to get the take of what it actually happened in the comics if you don't want to read the comic itself. Because you get to actually play through and you get to play as different heroes on different sides of the Civil War and on Cap's side and Iron Man's side, and you get to experience that as the characters. And then the newest ones about jumping on the in-game Infinity War bandwagon is all about Thanos searching for the Infinity Stones, and you're trying to stop that from happening. And they have a lot more heroes there, a lot of content. It is only on the Switch, but there's a lot of DLC out there already for that. And it's just these are really fun games that just if you just want to sit down and just mash some buttons and pull off some cool combos as you're fighting some bad guys. It's a good game for that, and it's all based within that Marvel universe.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really cool entry, particularly if you're a Marvel comics person. That's a as a DC Comics guy myself, I'm very jealous of games like that because, we've had the Injustice fighting games, which, is a very specific genre, and fighting games aren't my cup of tea, but it's a DC Comics game, so, I'll take it. We've had the Batman Arkham games. Those are, just solely Batman games, but we don't get a whole lot of, like, cool, just action beat 'em up, top down type experiences like you get with Marvel Ultimate Alliance. So I'm hoping DC kind of starts doing some more interesting games like that rather than just what we've seen so far, because man, I'm dying for a good Justice League game, I will say that.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, for sure. So let's now get into the top 10 proper. My number 10 game is from my favorite film franchise of all time. It is a third-person and first-person shooter game based on the Battlefield series, and that is Star Wars Battlefront 2, the 2005 edition. I played the crap out of these games as a kid. They were so much fun. There weren't a whole lot of experiences from a Star Wars gaming perspective that let you just play boots on the ground soldier, either as a clone trooper or even a trooper within the Rebel Alliance. Like, you got to play as the heroes, which is cool. That's, cool in its own way, but there's something very fun about just duking it out on the battlefield as just a regular rank and file soldier. And you still don't quite get the same experience even with the modern versions of these games. Like, they're very pretty, some cool experiences here and there, but there was just an openness to the original Battlefront 2 that is unmatched, and just the scale of it with some of the different game modes like Galactic Conquest that are missing from the modern versions that man, they provided an experience that you can't really get anywhere else.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I loved Battlefront 2. Galactic Conquest was my mode. I'm very sad it's not in the modern game right now. Fingers crossed at some point it will be. But yeah, I just remember, I can remember first time just spending hours playing that game with one of my friends, and especially going into Tatooine on the heroes only mode and playing that for hours, just doing random heroes. And it's just a lot of fun, a lot of memories, and yeah, an experience that has not been it's been imitated but not duplicated in the sense of with modern.
Right.
And like they've got some of the feel, but it still doesn't match up to that feel of what you had with the classic one.
Right.
So my number 10 was one of the first surprises that I had on my list. Did not expect this at all. It's a Xbox 360 original game released in 2008, and that is Left 4 Dead. Left 4 Dead is a multiplayer survival horror game that, man, it had me on the edge of my seat and made me jump. This game, I had to have my adrenaline pumping the whole time. The premise, for those who don't know, is a game that you're playing through. Every level you go through, you're trying to get to the end to get out of wherever you're at. It's a zombie apocalypse has happened, and the zombies are taking over the world, and lo and behold, there's different types of zombies. So in the video, you've probably seen this gangly looking zombie with long hair that is called a witch. I will never forget hearing the witch for the first time in the game, because it's just this whiny crying, and you're like, what in the heck is going on? And if you happen to find the witch and accidentally disturb her, she wakes up, screams at you, and just claws you to death. And I was freaked out the first time I experienced that. And it's just this is a very fun game to play with your friends, multiplayer wise, and have that experience together. As you're getting attacked by zombies, you may get attacked by one that captures you with its tongue and is pulling you towards it, and someone else has to come and save you. And it was a thrilling game, an exciting game, and I'm actually very sad they have not remade it since Left 4 Dead 2, because it's just a game that's like I think is due to be out again and for people to experience.
Yeah, yeah. Left 4 Dead 3, we really need it. It's I've had my fill of zombie games, but I could always go for more Left 4 Dead, especially if it's a new version of it.
Hmm.
I really enjoyed the original Left 4 Dead and Left 4 Dead 2. Those are the games that really taught me like how games can effectively use audio cues uh, to inform you as a player. Like I'd never really noticed sounds in games. Like you obviously hear sound effects, you can hear music, but it didn't necessarily tell you about the gameplay, but I really started to notice that as just a player, like just how much like sounds can let you know what's happening, what's going on, if you're about to be attacked by something. So that was just some pretty cool features from Left 4 Dead. So really cool game, really fun game. Miss it greatly. It's not gone or anything, but it's a little old now and could use
Yep.
a little updating. All right. My next game is a PC exclusive. It is both a real time strategy game as well as a turn based strategy game. This is Medieval 2 Total War. Now, the Total War games are a series of games where you take command of a kingdom or an empire, and you have to start out with just a couple cities or castles and just pretty much take over the map. And it is a lot of fun. I'm a big medieval nerd, love knights and stuff like that. So Medieval 2 Total War is such an easy choice for me. I've put so many hours into that game. It has a thriving mod community. And you get to just you take your armies, you're moving them around on the turn-based portion of the game, you're moving them around on the map, and then you get to execute those maneuvers and fight these battles in real time against the other players in the game. And it's a really great time. You really capture the feel of being a ruthless medieval ruler, and it's just a really enjoyable time.
Yeah, I had a friend back in college that played all of the Total War games, and he would spend hours and hours, and it looked really cool. And just the fact that they have the different versions of it that it can be based off your taste, whether it's medieval or like Napoleon was in the video, just whatever era that you like, they
Yeah,
pretty much have made it at this point.
yeah, yeah.
So very good choice. My number nine, kind of staying within the RTS world. Uh, the only difference being yours was in reality, mine's more in fantasy. That is Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle Earth. This is a game that came out for the PC back in 2004. And man, this game, I don't play a lot of RTSs. I enjoy some of them, but I loved this one. Just and then it's because it's Lord of the Rings. It's an aspect where you get to feel like you're in that world, taking part in the battles that are in the movies, recruiting the heroes with their actual voices, and just the epic music that is part of that franchise. You get to experience all of that in this game, and you just get to relive over and over every single battle and different scenes from the movies. And it's a lot of fun. I spent so many hours playing this. I used to have a physical copy, but even though it's an older game, it wouldn't work on my laptop anymore, and so I ended up giving it away. And now you can't get it digitally, at least legally.
No. Yeah, it is a great sadness that just because of the right situation, you can't really effectively get a hold of a digital copy, especially. Oh man, that's such a good game. I really enjoyed in the campaign. Like, there's some kind of alternate timeline stuff that you can do. Like, you can, if you're fast enough, you can save Boromir, and like he can like stay alive in the Fellowship and be a part of the game still, and you can use all his special abilities. So there were some fun things like that in Battle for Middle Earth, and that's just a really fun game. And if you have a physical copy of it, lucky you. That is it's a great game to have a physical copy of. All right, my next game is a classic game that has made lots of top 10 games lists all around. In fact, I think it was Game Informer's #1 game of all time, and that is The Legend of Zelda, the original Legend of Zelda for the NES. Now, the original Legend of Zelda is as the first game in a series. It's got a few rough parts around the edges, but it is still such an incredible game. It gives you so many choices as a player to pursue. You are just kind of dropped into this open world and are just sort of expected to explore and to try things out and to collect resources and to you're free to do all the dungeons that are in the game in any order that you want to do them. It so clearly values player choice and player freedom, choices that very clearly informed Breath of the Wild much later on. But there's just an openness to the game that is so brilliant, and it's still so much fun to go back and play. And this is a game I did not play until I was in college, and that was still fairly recent for me. So for this to make my top 10 games list of all time is a pretty incredible feat, I would say. Man, it's so good. You should, if you get the opportunity, you should go and play it. The only bad thing I can say about it is unless you have hours and hours to just play as if, like a kid would have, unless you have those hours, you should probably download a guide to actually like beat it if you're wanting to beat it in any sort of timely fashion.
Yeah, I mean, Legend of Zelda, it's iconic at this point. There's so many different versions of the game of just yeah. Can't really say much else beyond what you did of just like it's Zelda.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like it's interesting you mentioned the open world aspect. Like that's very much of what Breath of the Wild's like, and you can definitely tell they took inspiration from the first game and how in creating Breath of the Wild to make it open world and to where you can go anywhere that you see and do anything that you want. And you can even go try to beat the game right from the get-go. It will be hard, but you have that option.
Yeah.
So my number 8 is a game that was released in 2008 for the Xbox 360. It is the first action RPG game I ever played, and that is Fable 2. This is a game that was not on my radar at all. Shout out to my friend Nick Deck introducing this to me. But man, when I started playing Fable 2, I was sucked in. I loved the world, and I loved the story and the aspect of the character development. You start off as a kid, and you get to see him grow up a little bit, and you get a dog companion that helps you attack things and find things. And it's just that you had a little bit of a dynamic story that while you still had the action RPG aspects of being able to upgrade your character and go on quests, there was a main story that still drove the whole thing. And on top of that, what was really cool is your choices mattered. It mattered for how people perceived you, and it affected the world as well. Like they had this feature in it of character morphing, whereas you did good or bad things, your character would actually morph, and their appearance would change, and based off of what you did, and you may look really good or you may start looking really evil, and people noticed that. And that was just one really cool aspect of this. Just an example of like they really built a game that was that would constantly adapt as you made choices. And man, it's one of those of I know there's been a Fable 3 and it wasn't as well received as Fable 2. It was still good, but I know people have been clamoring for another Fable. And I'm one of those people. If they announce a Fable 4, I will be very likely buying it on my PC at some point.
Yeah, really, I'm a big Fable 3 fan. I didn't play much of Fable 2. I've never owned Fable 2. One of my friends had it, and I got to play with him, and I remember enjoying it enough that I was like, hey, whenever this Fable 3 comes out, I think I'm going to buy that one, and I did. And yeah, very, very fun game. I actually played it with my wife, and she enjoyed it as well. And my wife is not a video game player by any stretch of the imagination, so those are good games to introduce to people who don't play a whole lot of video games that they might enjoy. So might try that one out if you know anyone. The number 7 game on my list, I would consider kind of a PC exclusive. It's technically not. It was released, I think, on one or two different consoles, but I don't know anybody who actually plays them on console. And that is Age of Empires 2. Now, Age of Empires 2 is a real-time strategy game. It is the granddaddy of real-time strategy games, I would say, in that it came out, I want to say 1999 or 2000, but it pretty well set the tone for early 2000s real-time strategy games. And the premise is you take this civilization, you start in the Dark Ages and you work your way up through the Imperial Ages, and you can sort of define different victory objectives. The most common one I would do is the kind of the deathmatch type things where you actually go and just demolish all the other players on the map. Very fun game. Really incredibly balanced and provided a lot of different fun civilizations to play as that had unique bonuses and unique units. Really great time. I put so many hours into this. It was another way for me to sort of experience that, to scratch that medieval itch, if you will, of being a ruler trying to take over the world as some sort of medieval king or medieval despot, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, Age of Empires, like you said, it's been around for a long time. It has a legacy, and it deserves a spot. And if you're an RTS fan and you play it, it's going to be up there in your list of favorite RTSs. So
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
definitely
it is so good.
My number 7 is my newest game on my list. Even newer for me compared to when it came out. It came out in 2017 for the PS4, and that is Horizon Zero Dawn. For me, though, I'm a little late to the game. I just finished this game about a month and a half ago, and so yes, very late to the game. But man, I really really enjoyed this game. I mean, it is the most recent game for me that has stuck with me since I finished it. You're gonna notice, everyone's gonna start noticing something consistent about the rest of the games on my list. They're all very story driven. They have a story aspect, and this game, I was kind of iffy on the story when I first started playing it, but as I got more into the main quest and discovered the lore of what the developers had created, boom! Oh man, my brain exploded. I was just so taken away, and I started reading all the little different notes that you would find and listening to the audio clips. And a lot of games I don't do that. I skip that stuff because I just want to know more of the actual main story. But I was so drawn into the lore of this game. And then you add into that the gameplay is very dynamic, and the resource management where you have to get wood to make your arrows, and you have to find flowers and other things to create your fire and shock type weapons, and just on top of that, the different mechanical creatures that you encounter that you have to really figure out a strategy of how to take them down. Man, there is just a lot of depth here in this game, and it deserves the praise that it gets. I'm very excited that they announced the next one for the PS5. And I will definitely be getting that as soon as it comes out. I'm excited to see where they're going to go with the story.
Yeah, it will be interesting. Horizon Zero Dawn is not one I've played, but it's been on my list to play, and it's definitely up there. It seems like it'd be my kind of game. I enjoy a lot of the third-person action type games, so I'm pretty excited to go and play it, and I'm happy to hear, for the studio that they have the sequel in the works. It looked pretty cool from the PS5 event that they had. But I'm excited for that to happen. The next game on my list was originally a PC exclusive as well. It no longer is. It is now available on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. But this is the third-person and first-person action adventure sandbox RPG Mount and Blade Warband. Now, Warband is such a unique game in that it's a fully sandbox experience. You create a character. Essentially start out as a medieval peasant or just some sort of medieval character. You get to choose their backstory through some dialogue options, text options. It gives you some starting money and some starting weapons, and that's basically it. You have to then go from there, just being by yourself, to building a small band of warriors, into building an army that you are in the service of a king, to building your own personal army that you can then found your kingdom with and take over the map. And it is so much fun. You get to basically create a whole lot of stories that you are writing for your character. You're basically creating your own legacy, if you will. There's not any like grand objective that you're trying to accomplish necessarily. I think there is some sort of victory condition if you take over all the settlements and all the cities and all that on the map. I've never done that because I've just been having so much fun kind of getting to that point. I have put hundreds of hours into this game. It is definitely one worth checking out. Its sequel, Bannerlord, did just come out recently. It's still in early access, but you should definitely play Warband. You can get it for pretty cheap, so I would definitely encourage people to play that one.
That's, huh. That sounds very intriguing. I like the aspect that you can create your own story and you have unlimited choice.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of games do that. That's really cool.
Yeah, for sure.
My number 6 is another PS4 exclusive game. It came out in 2016, and that is Uncharted 4. This follows along with the theme of a game that is very story-driven. The Uncharted series is very Indiana Jones-like. You're a treasure hunter, and then you get into a lot of different perils. But man, Uncharted 4 was the epitome of what everyone wanted if there was going to be a final Uncharted game. From a story perspective, it had a great story. The gameplay was great. They upgraded their multiplayer, and a lot of people enjoyed that. And the way that the game ended, it was sad because it was over, but it was exactly what everyone wanted, and a satisfying conclusion to a series that they had fallen in love with and played every iteration of. I've been replaying through these again, and I just finished Uncharted 3 a few months ago. And that's one I probably won't go back and play again now that I've played it for a second time, because since I'd already played it, I put it on the easiest setting, and man, I died so much for being on easy. And I was so frustrated, thought about just quitting and just moving on, but I finished it off. And now I'm really excited to get into Uncharted 4 again and play through that one, because I did really enjoy it, and I really enjoyed the story. And man, just for being on the PS4, then graphically, it was stunning. I mean, going through some of the jungles and the other settings that they had, it just, things popped out at you and you felt like you were there. It's just a great, solid game. Another one that deserves the praise it gets, the high ratings that's gotten. I mean, it's over, supposedly, but if they ever did decide, hey, let's just make one more, I wouldn't be upset.
Yeah. Yeah, I have the Uncharted games. I've been meaning to play through them. I've only played through a bit of one, and I've really enjoyed that bit. I still have Uncharted 4 in the shrink wrap, and I'm excited to one day break that open and finally play that game, because they look so incredible, and they're fun adventures. Like you said, an Indiana Jones game essentially, and like who could not enjoy that type of game? So one of these days I'll actually get to playing it. The next game on my list is the first-person shooter that taught me how to enjoy a multiplayer experience, and this is 2007's Halo 3. There has been much praise lavished upon Halo 3, very deservedly so. It is an excellent game. It is the high watermark of the series pretty easily. The gameplay mechanics, the story, they all come together and work together so well. Halo's story has never been incredible by any means. It's been fine. It's serviceable. It's good. It's just not the most amazing thing in the world. But Halo 3 made a story that you cared about, and married together some really cool gameplay concepts and gameplay mechanics, and it was really fun to see Bungie firing on all cylinders, bringing the trilogy to a close, and then also pulling in some of the best multiplayer features in any game ever, with a lot of the Forge features, the theater features, the community sharing features were just really incredible. Like, obviously Halo 2 had a really incredible multiplayer community just for the gameplay aspect. I think Halo 3's tops Halo 2 Two's because of those community features that made it so easy and so much fun to share what you were doing with other people, and to get these little cool clips or funny clips, and just send them to your friends. It was there's really never been anything quite like that. Nowadays we have the easy ability to record gameplay and all that, and it's kind of sucked a lot of the fun out of it. You don't get a whole lot of theater modes anymore where you can actually like purposely record like machinimas. Do you remember when's the last time we've seen a machinima? Machinima's gone. And all that stuff really started with Halo 3, and it's sad to see that gaming has sort of moved on from it. But Halo 3 and all the features that you brought in, gone but not forgotten. Really incredible game.
Yeah, good choice. It's a great game. My number 5 deviates a little bit from my story aspect. It does have a story, but that wasn't the main drive of it. This is a game that was released in 2007 for the Xbox 360 and PS3, not on its own, but in a bundle called the Orange Box Bundle, where people were more focused on the other games that came in that bundle. This is Portal. Oh man, Portal. Portal came out of left field, to borrow a baseball term. It was just a game that was in a bundle, and people were like, "Oh, what's this?" And then they started playing it and fell in love with it, and for good reason. Portal is a great puzzle-solving game that also has a lot of humor in the Gladys character. And man, I remember just when I first started trying this game out, just being amazed of just how much my brain was challenged and trying to figure out the different puzzles, but also how much fun I had with it. And a lot of people will say that Portal 2 is just as good, if not better. I don't disagree with that, but without the original, you wouldn't have Portal 2. Because Portal 2 has a lot of really good humor as well. But there's just something about that original feeling of when you booted up the first Portal and started going through it and experiencing it. That is a lasting memory that I will have for a long time. And so to me, Portal 2 is a great game, but the first one had to go on my top 10 list over the second, just because of the original experience.
Yeah, that original experience is really hard to beat. Though Portal 2 does have some incredible moments with the lemon tirade that comes up in the campaign is one of the funniest things I've ever heard in a game. So good. If you're not familiar with it, it is a really incredible bit of voice acting. But just look up Portal 2 lemons. And you will probably find the right video for Portal 2 Cave Johnson lemons. Very, very funny. Yeah, the Portal game's so good. And the stealth delivery that Valve kind of did with that was really interesting, because I remember seeing some previews of Portal, and they just were showing off the puzzle mechanics, which were pretty brilliant, as is, mixing the red portal or orange portal, blue portal, and physics, and that's it. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Then the game actually came out, and there's actually a really neat story of this rogue AI who is trying its best to kill you, and it's very fun, very funny. Like it sounds like it's the setup for what would basically be a survival horror game nowadays, a la like Alien Isolation or something along those lines. But it is one of the funniest games in all of gaming, I would say. Really great sense of humor. All right, my next game on my list is another PC exclusive, another medieval game, and another RPG. Kind of. It doesn't look like it, but I promise it actually is. And that is Crusader Kings 2 from Paradox Interactive. Now, Crusader Kings 2 looks like not a real time, but it is in real time, but like a real time it looks like a big strategy game. But I promise it is not that, because the premise of Crusader Kings 2 is you get to play as the ruler, either as a count or a duke or a king or an emperor. You get to play as whatever ruler you want to play as in any kind of area of the map. You have a set of traits that you are assigned, and then you are just let loose to scheme against the other rulers, because they'll be scheming against you, and try to kind of set up your dynasty for power. And the really incredible thing about Crusader Kings 2 is all of these AI generated traits and all these AI characters are constantly scheming against you, even your own family members. And these stories just naturally pop up that aren't scripted at all. It's not like this is some grand campaign where this happens all the time. But for example, I was playing the ruler of some kingdom, and I was doing great. Except my brother, he was trying to depose me, so I didn't want to execute him because that would have hurt my relationships with all the other nobles in my kingdom, and that would have really screwed me up. So I was like, oh, I'll just banish him. I won't get any sort of negative opinion impact from that, and we'll be done with it. I won't have to worry about him. So I did that. A few years later, he comes back with this huge army out of exile, ends up conquering my kingdom, kills my character, and because he's the next character in the dynasty, I have to then play as him, and his stats were awful. He totally ruined the plans for my dynasty for years, but it was so much fun. It was so incredible to just have this event. I had to live with the consequences of a choice that happened way early on, and it's not like a choice and consequence in say like a BioWare game where okay they sort of telegraph the consequence and like you make this choice and you probably have to live with the consequences, but you can usually see what's gonna happen or a version of what's gonna happen. I had no idea this was gonna happen, and it just happened naturally, and that was so incredible. You just don't get these sorts of experiences from games nowadays, and I wish more games sort of adopted that trait system, the AI driven trait system, and just let its characters come up with their own agendas and let them pursue that as much as they want. Really fun game. It's free to play on Steam right now. Absolutely worth playing for free. The expansions are not free, but those are worth getting as well. Play it. So much fun. Have a great time with it.
I have not heard of that one before. I may actually try that one out because that sounds really cool.
Yeah, it's really incredible.
So my number 4 is our first crossover between our lists, and that is Halo 3. That is why I didn't say much beforehand. I don't have much to add beyond what Andrew said about Halo 3. It was a fantastic game. I still to this day, it's my favorite first-person shooter multiplayer game. I was not happy when they started copying Call of Duty and bringing in loadouts because I'm not a loadout person. I liked the arena style where you came into a map and you just knew where the different guns were, and it was a mad dash to get to those powerful guns. And then I felt it was more based off than your skill of if you could actually deliver using that gun then, rather than getting to start the map with this gun if you've unlocked it. And so I mean, get off my high horse there for a little bit about what they've done with Halo. But man, just Halo 3 itself, I enjoyed so much. I spent so many hours playing online. It's the first game I ever played consistently online with people. And like Andrew said, there was a lot of community there of just people creating things that you got to play. You had community that you got to create amongst your friends playing online together, because while LAN parties were fun, you couldn't get as many people as you could in a Halo 3 map to play. So you could have like giant rounds of infection and a lot of good memories with that. Or I will still remember, probably to the day I die, of when I had my first no-scope kill on Valhalla with the sniper rifle. And those are the type of memories that Halo created that I feel are missing now from first-person shooters, because it's all about just an objective that you're trying to do with the loadout that you've made, rather than being about just memories that you're making together with the people you're playing with.
Yeah, it has been disappointing to see Halo as a series chasing after Call of Duty and all the popular things that Call of Duty brought in. And that's no shade towards Call of Duty. It's just what I look for in a Halo game is not what I look for in a Call of Duty game. Those are two different things. And I've been a little bit encouraged seeing what 343 has been presenting with Halo Infinite, and how they're clearly going back to more the art style of the older games. So I'm hoping that means we might see a similar gameplay shift to the older style of games. And I'm hoping we see loadouts go away and sprint go away, and go more for that arena shooter experience. All right. We're here at the top three games, so let's get into the top three games of all time. Number three is a game that is a BioWare classic. It's another medieval game. It's another RPG, and that game is Dragon Age Origins. And Dragon Age Origins is it's not it's not an incredibly unique game, I will say, in terms of setting or tone. It's a very Dungeons and Dragons esque game that is also, it's a little bit more darker. But what's incredible about Dragon Age Origins is the titular origins system. You can create you get a bit different story based on what race and what class you're playing as. And those different origins, even though they're really only different in the first couple of hours of the game, created such a unique context for each individual character that you would then play as, that it really shifted what the rest of the game felt like. So, for instance, you have your humans and elves in the world of Dragon Age are an oppressed minority, whereas humans, the human noble that you can play as, is and lives in the lap of luxury. So seeing kind of these similar events from very different perspectives was a really cool way to approach storytelling. You don't have to change a whole lot of the quests that you do. You really only have to account for that at the start. And then you only tweak little things here and there that would relate back to your character. And this created a game that was very replayable. I generally don't play story-based games more than once, maybe twice if I really enjoyed it. But Dragon Age Origins, I have played, I don't know, probably played through its entirety, probably 7 times. And it is a long game. That's a lot of time to commit to, and I was very happy to do it because it was a really enjoyable game. And BioWare's excellent writing is just, it's phenomenal. There are lots of fun side characters and lots of really cool quests that you can do, and it's a game absolutely worth playing if you ever considered getting into the Dragon Age series.
I do remember years ago trying to start play Dragon Age Origins, and I don't think I ever finished it. I don't remember why, but I do remember enjoying the beginning. So yeah, I don't have much else to say about that, but like I'm more intrigued now after your description.
Yeah, it can be a tough game at times. There's some tricky spots, but overall, it's still a really incredible game from BioWare.
My number 3, as we get into towards the end here, is another superhero game, and that is Batman: Arkham City. This was released in 2011 for the Xbox 360 and PS3. And man, as good as Batman: Arkham Asylum was, Arkham City took what was good about that and multiplied it by 10, and made an amazing game out of it. The reason why this is Arkham City and not Arkham Knight has more to do with the story side of it. Arkham Knight, not to give away any spoilers, had a twist in it that should have been something that was a surprise, but because they didn't deviate too far from source material, made it not so much of a surprise, and that just made it disappointing. So for me, from just because of story, Arkham City has to be above Arkham Knight, because yes, you're not in Gotham, but you had a lot of the same mechanics beyond the Batmobile. You had a lot of the same gear, and you got to experience being Batman and going against his villains, who were captured very well. I actually started just replaying the remastered version on my PS4 recently, and I totally forgot that one of the quests that you do involves involves Zaz, and what he does is he has you have to answer telephones throughout the city to stop him from killing people. And it's exactly something that Zaz would do, and that's just an example of the developers captured the personalities of these villains so well as capturing what it's like to be Batman, having to use strategy to take them out. Some great boss battles and just a lot of good hours spent here, and a very satisfying story.
Yeah. The Arkham games have such an interesting legacy in that their combat system has been aped by several other games, both comic book games and other action games. But they've never been done quite as well as they were done, I'd say, in Arkham City. they get too complicated once you get outside of the Arkham games, and Arkham City just really struck a good balance of having some interesting abilities that you had to know how to counter, while also introducing some fun gadgets to use, and all those other, not copycats, but the people who tried to use that system just throw way too many things into it, in my opinion. So nothing quite beats the Arkham games in that regard.
Yep.
All right, my number 2 game is another one. It's another BioWare RPG, another very excellent BioWare game. There's not many BioWare games that aren't excellent, but this one really stands, I'd say, head and shoulders above many of them, and that is Knights of the Old Republic. Knights of the Old Republic is obviously from the Star Wars series, but this was the first Star Wars game that really lets you feel like you were playing through a Star Wars movie that was its own story. Like there were some other Star Wars games that let you play through the different movies. Obviously the Super Star Wars games, the some of the later games that came out on the original PlayStation and Xbox. But this one was so different in that it had a really high level of quality when it came to the writing, and it was its own real story. It was unique. Like obviously it hit a lot of the same beats that a Star Wars story often hits, but the way it did so was really cool and really fun. You had some really cool quests you could do, like you become a Jedi at one point, and the process of becoming that was really neat. There was nothing quite like it at the time in games. So while this kind of Star Wars adventure has been done since then, like this was the first one to really do it right and to really capture the epic scope and fun adventure that Star Wars provides for people.
Yeah, I've never played the first one. I did play a little bit of Knights of the Old Republic too.
You heathen.
Well, I mean, and I didn't even get to play that very much because of it would crash my PC.
Yeah.
So, but one thing I do remember about that was very dynamic at the time was they had branching conversations where you could have multiple responses back and forth with someone you're talking to, and that was very intriguing. So I'm not surprised I'm not surprised this is on your list with how much of a Star Wars fan you are and the dynamic aspects that the first one had.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, one that I probably would play if I would have had the opportunity, but yeah, my computer wouldn't let me.
Oh man, you gotta play it.
So my number 2 is my first franchise in my top 10. This is a franchise that when I first heard of it, I thought this has to be a joke. This is Kingdom Hearts. When I first heard about this and I heard it was a mashup of Final Fantasy and Disney, I was like, what? Like at that time, I hadn't had a lot of experience with Final Fantasy. My brother-in-law really enjoyed Final Fantasy X. But I was a huge Disney fan, so I was like, well, maybe I should give it a try. Like, kind of like one of those train wreck things. I'm like, it may be so bad that I just have to experience it. So I went and got it and put it in my PS2, and I fell in love, apparently. I was so shocked of just how much I enjoyed this game, and then what became a series. Between Kingdom Hearts and 1 and 2, I was just like waiting and waiting for the next one, and didn't have to wait as long as I did from the second one to the third one. Dang, 14 years. And sadly, nothing could live up to any expectation at that point after you've waited 14 years. But these games were hit me at a right time in life, of just in the sense of from a story perspective. And not only that, they have a great message behind it of just what it means to really care about your friends and sacrifice for them, and to pursue them when something is going wrong. And so, I mean, especially as for parents, if you have any kids that are into gaming and they've not played this, I definitely recommend it. The nice thing is that now all of them are available on Xbox and PlayStation. They have the Story So Far compilation that has all the games that were on even different consoles, even the handheld consoles adapted. And then you have Kingdom Hearts 3 that just came out last year. So it's a great story. a lot of fun. It's very fun combat. The first game is difficult for sure, just because it wasn't as fluid as it became over time. But you do a lot of cool things. You get to interact with different Disney characters. You go to different Disney worlds, and some of them are original stories, and some are you're actually getting to play through the movie, and that's really cool. Just a really fun thing to do, and kind of relive some of your childhood from the games that you, or I mean, from the movies that you watched within a game setting. And
Yeah.
even in the newest Kingdom Hearts, the people today that are in their teens or 20s get to experience that with some of the movies like Toy Story that they grew up with and the newest one. So just a really, really cool franchise there that I know is really dear to my heart that I really enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah. Those games I believe are available on Xbox Game Pass. So if you happen to be a subscriber on Game Pass, hey, there's an easy way to check them out. All right, we have made it to our number one picks for the best game of all time. But before we hit that, let's review what's been on our list so far. Number 10 for me was Star Wars Battlefront 2. Number 9, Medieval 2 Total War. Number 8, the original Legend of Zelda on the NES. Number 7, Age of Empires 2. Number 6, Mount and Blade Warband. Number 5, Halo 3. Number 4, Crusader Kings 2. Number 3, Dragon Age Origins. And number 2, Knights of the Old Republic. And my number 1 pick for top 10 games of all time is a tie between two Bethesda games, and that is The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion and Fallout 3. Now, I picked these games not solely for their strength of gameplay, though they are very fun games, but more so because these were less just games to play and more worlds to get lost in. And I absolutely loved that. Like, I think Oblivion and Fallout 3 both have a lot of individual faults. I think Oblivion is kind of a bog standard fantasy game in terms of its story, and art styles are a little bit wonky and collected from a lot of different sources. But Bethesda's environmental storytelling is just so incredible. They can tell a full story that is, it can be funny or affecting just from how they arrange things in the environment. And they're so good at making those environments feel natural and feel like this is actually happening. One of the things that I think most open world games are not so great at is their environments never quite feel fully realized, and that's Bethesda doesn't run into those problems as much. Their worlds feel fleshed out and realized, and there's a reason why things are the way they are, and there's this ingrained sense of history, both in Fallout and the Elder Scrolls series. Fallout is very very gorgeous aesthetically. They really nailed the retro futurism of the influence of the 1950s, and that is a game that is very fun, and I can get lost in it and just enjoy looking around at all these different locations that they made and discover all the fun and interesting stories that they have, and really get to enjoy and take in the environments. Even though it's this apocalyptic wasteland, there's still some really neat stories that they managed to sort of sneak in there, even though the main story is whatever. The little side things and all the little things that they pack in are so interesting and so much fun, and they keep me coming back in, and they keep me immersed, and that is why both of those games make my tied pick for number one game of all time.
That's very cool. I'm not a big fan of Fallout. I played Fallout 76 just to play with friends, but I have played the Elder Scrolls games. Oblivion was the first one I played. I did enjoy Skyrim more until I got to a certain point when the bug happened that took all my enchantments off my armor, so I gave up because I'd spent hours making that armor. But I would agree with everything you said. They're very aesthetically pleasing, and while they may not have like the greatest dynamic of even the story, you are in a world and you feel like you're in that world, regardless if it's Fallout or Elder Scrolls. Very excited for Elder Scrolls, whatever it's going to be called when it comes out next gen, probably like 4 years from now. But
Yeah.
very excited for that one. All right, so go over my top 10 again before I talk about my number one. My number 10 was Left for Dead. My number 9 was Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle Earth. Number 8, Fable 2. Number 7 was Horizon Zero Dawn. Number 6, Uncharted 4. Number 5 was Portal. Number 4 was Halo 3. Number 3 was Batman Arkham City. Number 2 was the Kingdom Hearts franchise. And number 1, if anyone has had an eagle eye, might be able to guess based off what's behind me. And that is the Legend of Zelda franchise. Um, I'm just going to get this out of the way because I'm going to upset the fan base. But I don't care. Um, Breath of the Wild is not my favorite Zelda game. It's actually my least favorite Zelda game of the ones that I've played. A lot of people were clamoring for an open world Zelda game, and I would have been perfectly fine with that. I wasn't clamoring for it, but I would have been okay with it, except for the fact, in my opinion, they sacrificed story to bring in the open world setting. You, there's not a lot of story in Breath of the Wild. You have a lot of past story that you have to discover through the memories you have to remember, but beyond that, there's not much of a story of what's really driving you, other than the fact that you've been asleep for so long and you need to actually go defeat Ganon and save Zelda. That's the story. And that was very frustrating for me because I love the Zelda franchise because of the stories. Ocarina of Time is my favorite Zelda game, and it's the first one I played outside of Link to the Past. But I played a Link to the Past for the first time when I was a younger kid and wasn't quite ready for it. And so Ocarina of Time was the first one I have a lot of memories of actually playing and beating. And I just so much enjoyed that game and the story that came with it. It's not perfect by any means, but it just had something dynamic of the aspect of being able to switch between an adult Link and kid Link, and that actually having a purpose. Just to figure out different aspects of different dungeons and the puzzles that were in the dungeons. They're just so good. And then after that, like, I'd say Wind Waker's probably the next one I like, just because of it was a little bit of an open world where you got to go through all the different islands and sail through the water, and it brought in a very different dynamic that hadn't existed in a Zelda game yet because of that. Um, but at the same time, it had a really good story. It was very engaging. It very much hit home of on you as being the character of Link, of just what was going on of with the beginning of his sister being kidnapped. Like, it had consequences right off the bat. I When it first came out, I actually was not intrigued because of the cartoony look of it, but I still gave it a chance because it was Zelda, and I loved it just because of the story, and also just the dynamics of being able to sail around and everything I already said. And then Twilight Princess would be the next one on my list, just because it was a return to the darker side of Zelda and being an adult Link, and it had a very dynamic aspect of where did get turned into a wolf, which was annoying at the beginning, but then once you got to the point you could switch back and forth, created another dynamic that helped with puzzles and that was needed just to figure out the different dungeons. And it had a story that was connected to other Zeldas, and it was a very good game, very dynamic, another very dynamic story. Just the whole franchise is a very dynamic franchise. There's not a bad game in the Zelda franchise. Just because I say I didn't really like Breath of the Wild doesn't mean it's still not a good game. I still enjoy it. It's just not my favorite Zelda game.
Yeah.
But man, that franchise, it'll take a really awesome game to uh, usurp that from my number one in my top 10 all-time game list.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with what you say. There are no bad Zelda games that I can at least think of, and there's something for kind of everyone to enjoy. So I'm much more of a open world Zelda fan. So I really love Breath of the Wild quite a lot. I think it's probably, of the Zeldas I've played, it's probably my second favorite one. And I still enjoy, Twilight Princess, Ocarina of Time. But I have more of the emphasis on the fun open gameplay that gives you lots of choices to approach different situations. But I can totally understand, from your perspective, why, you might enjoy the story-based Zeldas a lot more, because those are really enjoyable story-based ones. Twilight Princess has some really incredible dungeons. The dungeon design in that game is so good. I'd say probably some of the best dungeons in the series are all in that game, and it's really incredible with how many there are, just how they're all just really really solid. Yeah, no bad Zeldas. Really great pick for number one, Jeremy. I'd have to. I obviously don't 100% agree with everything there because I have my own top 10, but like I cannot argue against that at all. Not that I would, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So that's been our top 10 games list of all time. Let us know in the comments below what your top 10 games are. Let us know exactly why we're wrong with all of our top 10 picks. Normally we would have a little segment where we talk about the news, but this was a little bit of a longer episode, so I think we'll skip that little bit today. But if you've enjoyed what you've seen, be sure to follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/thehitpointshow. Or if you really liked what we're doing and want to kick a few bucks our way, feel free to support us on patreon.com/hitpoint. You got anything else to add, Jeremy?
Well, just if you enjoyed what you saw, hit that like button, hit subscribe. As I said at the beginning of the episode, we'll have a lot more content coming out and hope about lots of different pop culture topics.
Yeah, we've got some good stuff coming up today. To give a peek behind the curtain, Sony did announce their indie program, so I'll be recording a little segment where I talk about those games later, so be on the lookout for that. But that's all we have for this episode of Hit Point. I've been Andrew Jeffries.
And I've been Jeremy Robbins.
Thank you so much for watching, and make sure to keep an eye on your health bar.